Want to start at the other end of the table? Are you ready, or do you want to defer?
I can. Yeah, I was
Okay.
still framing my thoughts on the highlights of what I really resonate with from our community comments. So I appreciate this process. I feel like a fellow commissioner and I were undercover at the community outreach meeting because it wasn't a meeting we, had a role in, but it was very obvious that evening that it wasn't fun for either side to be there that night. And I appreciate and respect the restraint that was shown this evening with some of the comments made. This is a passionate issue. Clearly, our community is large enough to deserve ample recreational facilities, and the last decade has seen everyone doing more with less. We were fortunate to have we have been fortunate, and we are fortunate to continue having a very talented Parks and Rec department who has, I think, done their best. But to see the loss of the Rolladium, the bowling alleys, the ice rink is, it's unfortunate. Like many of you, I've had a hand in raising a lot of kids ice skating there, teaching them to, handle those edges. And I miss ice skating there. I think it's disingenuous, and I don't appreciate the rink not being available. That should be clear. I just don't like that. And I share that feeling with a lot of residents that I've met with throughout town. I think it's important to recognize that the people that live and recreate here spend money here. They've made that real clear. And I really don't want to hear people that live here say they're not going to spend money there. We need that. At the end of the day, that's part of the community. So that's just it leaves an ugly spot. I think, a bad taste in everybody's mouth. It's important to consider the comments of the children that evening on the 24th that said that, similar to the comments from To Kill a Mockingbird. Basically, if you got enough money, you can get what you want. And we heard that time and again from the little athletes that got up and shared the microphone that night. Not a good example of corporate ethics. So, regardless of how long this takes, I'd like to see that rink operational again. I'd like to see some recreational facility available to our public, because that rink helped that project get through. That's it. I don't think anyone's demonstrated financial records or attendance rosters to prove that the lack of that facility is going to help the mall do better. So why shut it down? I'm pretty sure that those restaurants have lost revenue. Pretty sure those stores have lost revenue. And bringing in more retail is just going to add more competition. Maybe that'll help drive prices down. I think we all learned that in economics, right? But there are fewer people there filling those parking spaces, drinking their coffee, buying their supplies. It's just, that's pretty simple. With all due respect to those families that just experienced a serious loss in Santa Barbara, physical health is tied to mental health, and vice versa. They're inextricably linked, to quote one of the speakers on KGO today. To take that from our community is just not right. I think our now mayor proposed some interesting concepts earlier on that were really not discussed, were not even addressed, and should have been on the 24th, really should have been. A good strategy for a public outreach meeting would have been to address the points raised by our elected officials. That would have been a good point. It wasn't done. We haven't seen any open, honest attempt to provide an assessment of money lost by the corporation, of future potential gains to the community. And to be fair, if you're going to take something away, you've got to give me something back in my community that has a fair market value. So I think that's pretty important that we consider as a community, and we recommend apples for apples. I'm going to look at my notes real quick and make sure that I've covered the highlights of what made sense.
This is not one and done, so, you know,
I'm sorry?
this is not one and done, so if you want to have another few minutes, we'll move on and come back to you for some supplemental comments. You know, this is...
Let's do that. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else ready? Yes, go ahead.
Sure. I mean, well, first I want to thank everybody who took time out of their evening to show up here, person after person, the long campaign that you've waged to, to raise the public consciousness about this issue, to continue the public consciousness that extends, decades back. Really, that's what this is. And I think that's really what, that's the question in my mind when I see this is what's changed. Since 1997, when everybody's hands were wringing back then trying to preserve this amenity, what has changed between now and then? The answer is actually quite a bit has changed. The community has changed quite a bit. Demographic changes, where Silicon Valley has moved further north. We have a new Plain Bay area. Someone actually alluded to the significant growth that the community is going to be experiencing in the next 30 years. Focusing housing around transportation to mitigate traffic impacts as much as possible. And what that says to me is that respite and amenities are going to be needed more than ever. People will be not afforded that green space, that opportunity to recreate as easily based on the plans for future growth within this city. Transit accessible, walkable areas. It's not a whole lot of backyards for a lot of people. And when you're faced with that situation, as there are definite benefits to that, and those will be discussed in the future. But what it underscores is the need for a variety of amenities that provide an outlet for the community, for the region. I welcome people from all over to come here to experience shopping at Bridgepointe, shopping in the downtown as much as possible. We have great food. And I really have not seen an adequate response to what has changed here that justifies a shift in retail strategy. And I think, I'm willing to listen to what the alternatives are, but I think it really was not a good faith gesture on the part of the applicant to start off by cutting off the amenity while discussions are occurring. I think that was even when you look back in 1997 when it looked like the Rink was on the ropes, there at least was a case to be made that, that the costs of operating the Rink, you had something you could work with. And this, no explanation, we're terminating the lease, to heck with the rest of you. That does not sit well with me at all in considering this application. And I think also, what this also speaks to me and I could talk a long time about this, but I won't, is the whole concept of fiscalization of land use. When you reduce, you look at what's valuable to a community and what makes a successful community. You have, healthy people, engaged, diversity, all of these things that make for the health and well-being of a community should not be reduced to what has the highest return on investment. Sometimes investments are made that may not be the most productive monetarily, but in the long run, you have a stronger, healthier community. And this does not play well. This proposal does not play with that concept to me. Did you want me to go into both questions or just first one?
I think we should just open it up because I think the two are
intertwined.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess the first thing I'd like to know is more detail as far as why the rink was closed in the first place. And and there was, to my knowledge, not a good explanation in that regard. I think we need a thorough economic analysis of the site, both before and after. When a proposal is put forward, if a proposal is put forward, that sort of analysis will need to be need to be presented, as as far as why this is so compelling. Again, it can't be just simply reduced to dollars, though, and I'm not convinced that this was, that the rink was actually hurting the site. I'd like to see an analysis of the Parks and Recreation's needs. I think it was in 1997, not to call out Sheila if she's still in the audience, but she put forward some views regarding the goals of the parks programming that said that we needed a certain amount of recreation space per person, that this was a vital component of meeting that need, and again, what has changed? Why is this amenity being sacrificed? Let's see here. I'd like to also get a little more. I appreciate Ms. Whalen's comments regarding why the site had to be, why we cannot compel the applicant to reopen the site. I'd like to see a little more legal analysis in that regard. Just to me, intuitively, that just doesn't feel right. But if there's a construct that justifies that, then I certainly want to see that. I think a lot of people want to see that. I guess I'd also like to see what the impact of the elimination of a recreational facility would have on the EIR standing, considering the overriding considerations for something like this. It was part of the justification. We talked about all these different traffic and so forth, but I think there's also, as with other projects, the governor recently used it for high-speed rail, that there were overriding considerations. I think, if we are going to eliminate this amenity, well, that may set things back a bit as far as the environmental considerations. Vehicle miles traveled becomes a much more significant component, for people who have to drive far and wide to get their kids to ice skating. And I guess I'd also like to see some response regarding the feasibility of adding, somehow making this a win-win situation. Is it possible to add retail above this site? They certainly can go above the 55-foot height limit with sufficient community benefit. I think in the Q&A they incorrectly said 34 feet.
Can I make a comment on that?
No, I'm sorry.
Not even answer.
Well, I don't know. Is this a question? You're asking a question of the applicant?
Regarding the height, I just want to clarify.
We're going to go there. We need to stop Commissioner Hoog's comments, and we need to reopen the public hearing and have this person come to the podium.
Okay, can I just ask a question, though, before we go further? Do you represent the applicant?
Yeah.
Okay, it's my question for council. We can't ask questions of the applicant?
Yes, you can.
That's what I'm saying, is if in fact Commissioner Hug is asking a question of the applicant.
Okay, right. And then we need all the testimony on the record, and so any speaker needs to come to the podium
Yes,
and speak into the microphone.
Yeah, okay. So
We can either do that now or for future consideration, either one.
it's up to you. It's you've got the floor. So if you want to ask a question, do so. Otherwise, we'll
Okay,
just.
I'd like to see a written response.
Okay, so no, I don't think, well, okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so I think I think given the history of this site, I think a high bar has been set to replace such a unique community asset. And, it's going to be a tall order to try and get this to provide a use that would be as valuable as something like this. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Who'd like to go next?
Okay, I could. Thank you. I'd like to say that I appreciate all of you coming out here tonight to share with us your feelings and your sincere comments and how much the rink has meant to you over all these many years. And I'd like to say that I really wonder what the Developer SPI is thinking by coming back with this kind of a request and application, because while many things have changed in the world, as my fellow commissioner here said, really nothing has changed with relation to this particular question that was raised way back in '98. It's still a question of the people have in place a certain amenity that was foundational to the very approval of the entire site. It was part of, the site was built around it, the thinking was done all around it, and I would really even question what this does to the approval that stands, that enables the entire site to be there, if you remove this key building block from the entire construct. I think it has to be said, my fellow commissioner next to me here alluded to it, with comments about the developers' return on investment and so forth, but I can simplify it. I don't believe the ice rink was ever intended as a profit center. I don't think so. It was meant as something that was put there for the people. It was part of what was expected that the developer would provide for the people in exchange for getting their ability to profit grandly, as they have over these many years. That shopping center does not suffer for clients. Plenty of shoppers out there all the time. They have good big stores that are frequented by not only San Mateo residents, but lots of other residents. So I think that's kind of key. Additionally, with regard to the ability to force the developer to operate the rink, I don't think it should be a question of that at all. I think we're looking at it from the wrong side. There was no written mandate to operate explicitly stated for the rink because it was always obvious that it was intended that an approved land use would be operated. It was absolutely understood that the required rink under the land use would be operated. It would be stating the obvious to say, so by the way, you have to operate it. So that said, I also want to see, being as a planning commission, I need to do lots of due diligence here. We need to see financial reports, both, as Bertha Sanchez said, how much money has the City of San Mateo and the mall both been losing since the Rink closed. How much revenue was generated by the Rink and the restaurant, and how much would be generated by the new uses, and what shares were coming to the city from the Rink and the restaurant, and really what shares could be expected. I've heard the number bounced around of $300,000. I don't know how realistically that is. What revenue could be expected, really? We need a financial expert to look at this in terms of a feasibility study so that we can weigh everything. The operating costs, we need to look at what the operating costs for the Rink are, because we need to see if there are other operators who may be available to come and operate this thing. Whether the mall wants to hear that or not, I think we need to hear and know these things. What would the fees, basically all the same questions that were asked back in '98. What would be the feasibility of subsidizing a tenant, an operator? So we need answers to all those same questions. This thing was instrumental as a partial justification, and this is a quote I took right out of one of the reports, partial justification for the 3 unmitigatable project impacts. I don't think that stuff's gone away. Impacts continue to exist there. And I also want to see the other reports that I asked about, the MMRP. I'd like to get the trip demand management information, whether it's been monitored or not. And we need to know, what are the traffic impacts right now? Have they increased? Have they decreased? What are they? I think those are my comments. Thanks.
Okay. All yours.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the planning staff for your well-written administrative report and the well-organized information packet that the Planning Commission received. I'd also like to thank the public for your perseverance on following this issue and coming out to all of the public meetings that we've held up until this point. Per the large information packet we received, the saga of Bridgepointe began, actually, Fashion Island in 1981, and then 1996 with Bridgepointe. There were many, many meetings, discussions, which culminated in a master plan that was approved in September 1996. And then that last time that any action was taken with regard to Bridgepointe was in 1998, when there was a request to substitute 3 retail spaces for the ice rink, which eventually ended up with the applicant withdrawing that application. But City Council did make some adjustments to the master plan language and the conditional uses, conditions of approval. So with regard to the master plan, they wanted the word, the new language to read, ice rink or similar recreational uses. I believe that an ice rink is a unique use, an amenity for the community. It provides a diversity in recreational experiences for the people of San Mateo. It can be used by all ages, all genders, all cultures, and individual as well as team activities, and for people with all abilities. It provides, being an indoor facility, it provides year-round use. It's not weather dependent, and it can operate extended hours. I cannot think of any similar recreational uses that provide all of that. And in the words of former council member and Mayor Gary Yates, he is quoted as saying, "I think it's a resource the city will not be able to replace," and I agree with that. With regard to the condition of approval, actually it was a new condition of approval that was added in 1998, alternative recreational use. Any alternative recreational facility proposed on the site of the existing ice rink building shall be of similar size, shall serve a variety of ages in both sexes, and shall be designated for active sports recreation, subject to review and approval by the Planning Commission. I think the first key part of that condition of use is on the site. And so I don't believe that we should be considering either a recreation fee paid in lieu of, or finding a new location for an ice rink. And finally, I feel that the property owners and the applicant have been in violation of this condition of approval of the Bridgepointe Master Plan since 2012, when the ice rink was shut down, which deprived the local and regional skating community of a one-of-a-kind recreational resource. So at this point, I'm not looking favorably upon the applicant's proposal, and I would agree that we do need some additional studies to sort of back up what my gut reaction is to the proposal. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm in general agreement with the comments of my fellow commissioners. And I also guess I'd like to go back in some sense to a beginning to sort of try to get my arms around what this is and where it's going. And I guess I start with the closure of the rink to begin with. I understand SPI looking at this site and saying, gee, we would, our shopping center would be better off if instead of an ice rink here, we had a series of retail stores. Okay. I understand that. And I can understand SPI coming to the city and saying, asking for a change in the master plan to allow for that. What I don't understand is closing the rink. I don't understand what the applicant thought they were going to achieve by doing that. What we've seen is that the rink's been closed for 12 months. And basically, the state of play on this is where it was 12 months ago, and that is that there's a proposal before the city to allow them to tear the rink down and replace it with retail stores. I think it's pretty clear from the comments of my fellow commissioners, and I join them in this, that to put it mildly, we do not appreciate the closure of the rink. This gesture is not well received by this commission. And I speak for myself and I think my fellow commissioners, that we would like SPI to seriously consider reopening the rink while consideration of their proposals proceeds. As we've all said, this is a process that's going to take quite some time. As I say, we've already consumed 12 months and gotten virtually nowhere. So I would like very much to have SPI consider reopening the rink, and we're not looking for you to give them a 20-year lease. We're looking for reasonable continuation of the rink operation while consideration of your proposals goes forward. Okay, then you come to us and you say that you want us to consider your request to change the language. But without any apparent recognition that this is a facility that is clearly of value to the city, of value to the community, and of value to a considerable segment of the San Mateo population. And if we've accomplished anything over the last 12 months, I think that last point has been pretty well demonstrated. So, and in that time frame, we've heard, I just found out this morning by reading the Daily Journal, that apparently our mayor made a proposal to you about a possible so-called win-win idea that was not addressed.
Not accurate.
I'm sorry, but I can't take comments. My point is not whether or not it's accurate, it's whether or not it was addressed by the applicant in its submission tonight. And likewise, there are some other ideas out there, like the one that was proposed by this group that apparently has been working the issue assiduously for the last 12 months, and there may be issues with their proposal as well. But the point is that they've been thinking about it, and these thoughts are around the notion that there is a facility of value to the city that will be lost in the process of converting this land use to retail, and some provision for replacement of that facility has to be made. And in that sense, I think what you're hearing from this commission is writing a check, and just handing the city a check and walking away is not going to be good enough. That what this commission will be looking for, if you want us to recommend this change to the city council, is an inclusive proposal that says, okay, we'd like to do this thing, and here's what we will, here's what we can do, here's who we can work with to provide for a replacement, enhancement, the continuation of this facility. And that's missing. So I guess in terms of my general comments about the project sponsor's proposal, absent some serious movement in these directions, I certainly couldn't recommend it to the city council. I think we'd have to tell the city council, we would have to recommend denial. I won't get into the whole question about whether legal action can be taken to force the reopening. I don't know the answer to that. We've heard the city's position on this. We've heard some arguments made by counsel for the Save the Rink group. I don't know, and I think the last thing anybody concerned with this needs is to get involved in litigation. This is a business matter. This is something that should be negotiable and resolvable in a business setting. I think my fellow commissioners have covered rather thoroughly the list of analyses and considerations that should be, the information and specific studies that would be required for us to make an informed land use recommendation about this. I think if we're going to consider it, we need the things that that everybody's talked about. I don't really have anything to add to that list. So that's where I am. Does anybody else on the commission have additional comments that they would like to make? I think, Commissioner Dressley, we made you go first, so we didn't give you as much opportunity to develop your thoughts as you might have had.
I am glad that we're all really community-focused here because we always recognize staff for their time and the public for being here tonight. It's not easy. You've heard me say it before. We all know how difficult it is to get up there and put a sentence together. But the reality is it's not easy for the developer either to try to represent their goals and plans and dreams. I think it's important that this developer and business partner in this community understands we want them to be successful, but not at the cost of the health of our community. This is a unique asset, and I think it's important for them to consider the value lost by taking this away, and that's some damage control. You need some serious PR work at this point. So I really hope that we see something that benefits our community above and beyond what this ice rink did. And maybe that newer, better facility is the way, but taking it away while that is considered is not helping anyone. So that's it. Thanks.
Okay. Additional comments?
To say that thank all my fellow commissioners for their comments because I do concur with everything I think I've heard. I do have something else I would like to add because I don't think I heard this explicitly requested, which is a report from the Parks and Recs Department. I know that I saw information regarding a report that had been made back in '98. It included information such as acres of park per thousands of residents. I would like to know what that figure is now because at the time it represented a significant deficit of recreation space. And I'd like to say that I don't believe the applicant has provided a compelling reason for this change. I really haven't clearly heard what I feel is a compelling reason for this change. And regarding what I said earlier about the fact that the implied understanding was that the land use would be operated. I think this falls under the category, and I'm no attorney, but I've heard this comment, and it's the spirit of the law. So it's like when this was done, it was just understood that you understood, the developer, the owner, that you would be having a rink, and nobody at that time raised any complaints until later. And for whatever reasons they had. Obviously, I understand they would be more comfortable with retail, that's their business, but this is something that they agreed to in order to get what they wanted. They need to keep that agreement. You have to keep your promises. So with that said, I would urge the city attorney to look deeper at this issue. I believe that there is some way to find some place where agreements that weren't explicitly written out, but were certainly implied and understood, somehow take precedent. And I would concur with the suggestion of the chair that it would really please me, and I'm sure many people here in San Mateo, to see the rink reopened during the interim while so much back and forth is going to be going on over whether or not you will be granted a change in land use. Thank you.
Any other comments from anybody? Well, on behalf of myself and the commission, I want to thank all concerned for coming tonight, the applicant, the members of the public, the planning staff who have done an enormous amount of very good work, the public groups who have put an enormous amount of uncompensated time and effort into informing this commission about this issue. I want to thank all of you. As I said at the beginning, this is the start of a long process, and we assuming this continues to go forward, we have a long road to go on, and I hope that we can do so as constructively as we have tonight. Thank you very much. That concludes our discussion of this agenda item. Next item is communications from staff.